alone, no chaperone can get our number. The world's in slumber, let's misbehave. There's something wild about you, child, that's so contagious. Let's be outrageous, let's misbehave.
Has all the primary elements. It's got an unconventional romance, a self-directed screwball heroine, rapid-fire dialogue, physical comedy. I mean, the pool duck scene and I love the land yacht car chase scene. And it also has its satiric element.
Yeah, and I think what separates 30s screwball from something like this in the 1940s, the code had been established and was well in effect by 1941, and there were issues with the production code in this movie, specifically with the sequences where Veronica Lake and Joel McCrea are sleeping together next to each other in the train or on the group, area where all the people are sleeping. There were objections to that, and you definitely see that a lot more in comedies of the 1940s where, he really wanted to illustrate ways that people were interacting with each other, and he really didn't appreciate the code trying to assert kind of the storytelling elements that he wanted.
But he is such a master writer.
Yeah.
Sturges is able to get around the code, get the messages across. We all know what's going on, and it's quite effective. He is such an efficient filmmaker. I mean, the pacing of this movie, it really tells so much in a very short amount of time.
Yeah, he is the master of lean movies. This is just 90 minutes. I think Miracle of Morgan's Creek is also in a similar space of time. And, there's something to be said about classic films of the era that were able to accomplish a lot in between 60 to 90 minutes.
They're so disciplined then.
Yeah.
Movies are much longer now.
Sometimes too long, depending on the movie.
Yes. Tell me, what is your favorite part of Sullivan's travels?
Oh,
is there a particular scene or a particular aspect of the film that...
I love that sequence in the movie where it's Veronica Lake's character who has just found out that she believes John L. Sullivan is dead, and the camera just lingers on her face as she's crying.
Right.
And I watched that, I remember where I was in my room watching that on a very small television and just being gobsmacked at just how ethereal she looks. She's angelic. It made me a fan. It made me a lifelong fan of hers, and she does so much with so little. It's why when people say they don't think she's a good actress, I have to roll my eyes and scoff, because I'm just then you're not looking at the right things.
Right. They're not looking closely enough because she is so persuasive and convincing in this role.
Yeah, she blends the hardened sensibilities of a Barbara Stanwyck and an Ida Lupino, and yet she was barely 5 feet. As her biographer Don Bain told me, she was a short girl with a big bust and a loud mouth. And I love that about her.
Perfect for a screwball heroine.
Exactly, and I think that she's unlike most of the screwball heroines that people saw, and I think that unfortunately that pigeonholed her as not being somebody that could work in the genre.
Right. Now you mentioned in your introduction that you have interviewed family members of Veronica Lake. She's best known to today's audiences for her film noir masterpieces.
Yeah.
However, she has this screwball comedy and also another screwball comedy.
Yeah, in 1942 she did I Married a Witch. Preston Sturges was supposed to direct that, and he did not, but he produced it, and he had Renee Claire direct it, who was a great kind of ethereal fantasy filmmaker. It's based on a book, which I've not been able to get my hands on, and I really want to. And it's delightful. It's supposed to be the inspiration for Bewitched, depending on who you talk to in the Bewitched camp. For legal reasons, they've said yes or no, that it was direct inspiration, but it is. And she's great in it. She acts like she's a vengeful witch that is out to get, the heirs of this legacy of men that have wronged her, played by Friedrich Marge. She gets to be physical, she gets to slide down banisters, she stuffs waffles in her mouth, and yet at the same time she is the picture of cool, you can believe that she's a witch from the Salem witch trials. She's just so funny, so beautiful. And I love the stories, you know, her and Friedrich March did not get along. They hated each other. She claims it was because he made a pass at her and she told him she was not into him and he was not happy about it. But supposedly she kind of like played pranks on him all the time. She'd stuff rocks in her coat when he had to carry her. There's a scene where she's sitting in a chair with her legs out and you can only see the top half of her in the frame. Supposedly she was kicking him in the groin while she was making this scene. They hated each other, and yet you cannot tell at all because she is just seems to be having so much fun in the movie.
So that's good acting.
Exactly.
And in this film, her comedic skills are showcased.
Yeah.
I mean, and the rapid fire dialogue. Preston Sturges is known for his mastery of the English language, the wit, and it's fast. Of course, with screwball comedy, it's always very fast. And she just nails it.
Yeah.
You hear everything, and she keeps up that fast pacing.
Yeah, and she really has that great disillusionment that you probably, at the time, if you were, you know, a young person in Hollywood, that you saw in a lot of the young women that, you know, when she has that whole speech to Joel McCrea about, oh, if you were a director, I would probably say this to you. You know, she's really tapping into what a lot of young women, no doubt, probably felt in Hollywood, which was that they had to flatter male egos, you know, and she talks...
At the very least.
Exactly. She
Maybe
talks
more.
very openly in her autobiography about not wanting to please men, you know, and wanting to be her own person, and I love it. She was ahead of her time. I think that was her problem. Oh, she had other problems, but that, I think, was one of them.
Well, let's talk about Joel McCrea, her co-star in this film. You've also interviewed family members of Joel McCrea. He had a monster career, over 100 films in all genres, and yet today he's not thought of with his screwball comedy legacy, but he starred in so many, always complimenting his co-stars. The Richest Girl in the World with Marion Hopkins, Adventures in Manhattan with Jean Arthur, of course, The More the Merrier, again with Jean Arthur. It seems as though no matter who he's paired with, he always makes them shine. He's a very collaborative actor.
Yeah, when I talked to Wyatt McCrea, he said that, you know, he thinks that a key reason that his grandfather is not better known, you know, not one of the first names in comedy or really acting, is because he didn't make waves in the industry. You know, he made the films he was required to make, made the films that he wanted to make. He was never involved in scandal, and he also was a great director or a great actor opposite the women that he worked with. And he worked with some difficult women, you know, not just Veronica, but Miriam Hopkins was also very, very temperamental, was very hard to work with, and he worked with her more than once. And clearly they were able to establish a rapport, and most of the women, even though he may not have liked working with Veronica Lake, she always said Joel McCrea was one of the nicest performers that she had ever worked with. And so, you know, I think unfortunately in Hollywood it doesn't always pay to be the nice guy, and I think that that's what happens here is people discover him, they're like, why don't I know about Joel McCrea? And I always tell people, well, you know, he's not flashy. He wasn't in, you know, swashbucklers, and he wasn't, you know, he was in serious movies, but he didn't have the whiz-bang, you know, being in the trade papers and
But
all
isn't that exactly what Preston Sturges was seeking in using Joel McCrea?
He wants an everyman.
Exactly. He wanted that relatable persona, which he had.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's talk about writer-director Preston Sturges, one of the giants of the Hollywood golden era, and he was the first to break through for being acknowledged and credited as writer-director. Of course, Ernst Lubitsch, the Grand Master, before him didn't take the writing credit that when he co-wrote so many of his films, but Preston Sturges led the way for Billy Wilder and John Huston, and today it's very common to have writer-directors, but then, what a trailblazer he was.
Yeah, I mean, again, also a very colorful figure. He was married, I think, 4 times, you know, and it's always...
2 heiresses.
Exactly.
He led a screwball comedy life.
He did, and I think that's what I love watching this movie, is how much John L. Sullivan is Preston Sturges, having to prove himself as not just a director of comedies, but a director with something to say, trying to get away from his, wealthy past. And it's always a shame to me, and again, I said it in the intro, Tom Sturges said that it was a shame that Sturges did not live a couple more years to when the film schools and the, French directors started to discover him, because no doubt he would have been in demand as a person to lecture and to talk about film and his time there. But, he led a really colorful life, and as most of the old Hollywood creatives that led the best, most shocking lives that you remember forever, they also die really young, so, but the talent is on the screen. I mean, I don't know any director that can kind of top himself in the way that he did. You watch the run of movies that he did in, the early 40s, whether it's this, or it's Christmas in July, or it's The Lady Eve, or again, The Miracle of Morgan's Creek, he was just able to key into making people laugh, kind of thumbing his nose at the production code, and giving social commentary where he could.
And that's why he's a Grand Master today. Yeah. Now, he wrote from his original works. He did not adapt. Your book that you have written and was recently published by TCM is, but have you read the book? 52 literary gems that inspired our favorite films. Let's talk about that for a minute. The challenge of adapting a book into a screwball comedy film.
Yeah, I mean, it's more difficult than it seems, and I think there's a reason, as far as I know, somebody can tell me if I'm incorrect, that Sturges' work hasn't often been remade, just because you don't get the same element to it. But, the example that I always use with a screwball adaptation is The Thin Man.
And you have a chapter in your book.
I do have a chapter on my book about The Thin Man, and, Dashiell Hammett tried to write the script, could not do it, and got really mad at how the film turned out and jumped ship, I think, after the second film. But people are surprised that there were five movies, I think, and there's only one book. It's not a book series.
Right.
So it was just the one book. But to read The Thin Man, if you've seen the movie, it's hard to read the book without thinking of Bill Powell and Myrna Loy. And the book is crazy. It's got drug addiction, it's got infidelity, it's got a really weird extended discussion about cannibalism, and you really do lose that luster of reading it on the page. That's not to say that the book isn't great, it's a lot of fun, but you can see where screenwriters really did use those books as a launch pad to really kind of play. And I know that the director, W.S. Van Dyke, told the screenwriters, use the text as a foundation and not a guide. And I think the best adaptations do that, by using it as a place to start, but not a place to end.
Right. And I was particularly interested in your book because, like so many people, I've had the experience, I walk into the theater scratching my head because I've read the book and I've just seen the movie and whoa, never the two shall meet. The book is so timely because of anytime there's an adaptation, it always raises the issues, and people just invariably do compare these two different forms of art.
Yeah, I've talked to screenwriters who have done adaptations, and they've said that it's one of the hardest things to do because you have to appease two very different audiences. An audience that knows the source material and expects you to give them the same feeling that they had when they read the book, and an audience that doesn't really know anything and just wants a good story. Sometimes those audiences are completely different, and,
Can you share with us a little about another screwball comedy, Gentlemen Prefer Blondes?
Yes, Anita Luz's Gentlemen Prefer Blondes is one that I was really excited to include because I did not know it was a book when I watched, and I love the movie. Howard Hawks makes a great adaptation of it, but it's also a lot like Sullivan's Travels in that it's poking fun at people that really did exist. So Anita Luz used a lot of her own friends, a lot of Hollywood people when writing that book. In fact, if you've seen Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, you probably know the little boy that is the character, Henry Spofford, that Marilyn thinks is a wealthy heir. Well, in the book, he's actually a grown man that was based on Will Hayes, who started the production code, and the book ends with the character of Lorelei Lee marrying this man so that he can go make movies that she can star in, and whether they adhere to the code or not, you know, it doesn't really matter.
That is so different from the film.
Yeah, exactly. And I can see why it was changed for the film.
Well, Kristen, thank you so much for being
We're all alone, no chaperone, can't get our number. The world's in slumber, let's misbehave. There's something wild about you, child, that's so contagious. Let's be outrageous, let's misbehave. When Adam won Eve's hand, he wouldn't stand for teasing. He didn't care about those apples out of season. They say the spring means just one thing to